The train had long since gone, its echo swallowed by the desert, leaving behind only the breath of dust and the sigh of iron cooling in the night. A lone lamp swayed over the station's platform, its light trembling like a dying heartbeat. Cole McGraw, age 30, stood there with his hat low and grief thick around his shoulders, a widower carved from the quiet. He wasn't waiting for anyone, he'd stopped waiting years ago, but some nights the wind carried ghosts too heavy to ignore, and he came here to listen. Tonight, the wind carried something else. She was standing by the bench, bare feet on the splintered boards, hair unbound and black as midnight water. Tiva, age 22, an Apache woman with eyes full of starlight and exhaustion, watched him the way wild creatures watch the first flicker of fire, half fear, half wonder. Her dress was torn, dust clinging to her knees, but her spine held its own unspoken pride. Cole meant to nod, to walk past, to keep his silence unbroken. But she stepped forward before he could turn away, the lantern's glow catching the fine trembling of her lips. "Don't leave me alone," she said, her voice a whisper dressed as prayer. "I'll give you a love you never expected." The words struck him harder than any bullet, not because of what they promised, but because they sounded like something he'd forgotten how to believe in. For a moment, he thought she must have mistaken him for someone else, some kinder man with less ruin behind his eyes. But she was looking at him, only him, steady as if she'd been waiting all her life for this exact hour. The desert went utterly still, as if the whole world had paused to hear what he'd say next. He didn't speak. He couldn't. The lamp hummed. The wind pressed a cool hand against his neck. Tiva lowered her gaze, not in shame but in strange acceptance, as though his silence had been part of what she expected. She turned slightly, as if to leave, and something inside him, lonely, foolish, aching, lurched forward before his mind caught up. "Where you headed?" he asked. She shrugged. "Away from here. Toward something that'll take me." Cole didn't know why he said yes, but soon she was sitting beside him in his wagon, a thin blanket over her shoulders, the night stretching endless ahead. The wheels creaked, and the stars blinked awake. Her presence filled the space between them, not loud or soft, just there, like warmth after a long frost. Every few miles, she hummed a tune, low and ancient, words lost to the wind. He didn't ask what had brought her here. She didn't ask what had broken him. The silence between them became its own fragile peace. And yet, beneath the calm, a curiosity began to take root. By dawn, the desert turned gold and lavender. They stopped at a narrow stream where the water ran cold and clear as glass. Tiva knelt to drink, then whispered something in Apache, a sound that seemed to belong to the land itself. Cole watched, trying to imagine what she saw in him, a man built of fences and loss. When she caught him staring, she smiled, small and knowing. He looked away, heat rising in his face like sunrise. As they rode north, clouds gathered over the mountains. The first flake of snow landed on her hair, white against black, and he realized how easily a person could vanish out here, how he might lose her before he even learned her story. They reached his cabin by the ridge that afternoon, the sky already bruising with cold. Smoke from the chimney rose like a promise, though he had no right to offer one. When they entered town for supplies, heads turned. Conversations broke off mid-sentence. Someone muttered savage, and Cole's fists curled. Tiva's hand found his sleeve, gentle but firm, her touch an anchor. She met the stares with quiet dignity, eyes calm as a river that refused to flood. Her restraint humbled him more than any fight could. Back at the cabin, she walked through each room, tracing the edges of his loneliness with wordless care. The place smelled of pine, ash, and memory. His late wife's shawl still hung by the door. Tiva didn't move it. She only opened the windows, letting in air that smelled of thaw and beginning. By evening, she had started a fire, patched a torn curtain, and set a pot of stew on the hearth. Cole stood in the doorway, unsure whether to thank her or apologize. "Eat," she said softly. "You look like a man who's forgotten how." He laughed, a sound rough with surprise, and obeyed. She smiled faintly, as if she'd just won some silent argument with fate. Outside, the storm deepened. Inside, warmth began to thread its way between them, invisible but real. Yet every time she looked at him, he felt the ghost of the town's eyes, the whisper of judgment pressing at their door. Days slipped into weeks. Tiva tended to the cabin and the land without being asked. She brought herbs from the woods for his aching shoulder, showed him how to listen to the rhythm of wind to know when rain would come. He, in turn, fixed the fence not with anger but with patience she'd taught him. Each small act became a language, each silence a kind of prayer. The past began to lose its edge, replaced by something he didn't dare name. One afternoon, a boy from town appeared with wildflowers in his hands. "Miss Tiva," he said shyly, "Ma says thank you for the medicine." Cole watched from the porch as she knelt to accept the flowers, her smile blooming like spring against the frost of his heart. For the first time, he thought maybe the world could learn to soften. That night, she fell asleep by the fire, a book open beside her. Cole draped his coat over her shoulders. Her hair caught the lamplight, turning it to river silk. As he stood there, she murmured his late wife's name in her sleep, a sound so gentle it nearly broke him. He sank into the chair opposite her, the weight of forgiveness pressing against his chest, too large to hold. When the first warmth of spring came, the river thawed, and so did he. Cole asked her to walk with him to the water's edge. The world smelled of lilac and pine sap. He wore his only clean shirt. She wore a white buckskin dress stitched with silver beads that shimmered like morning dew. The preacher, uncertain but moved, waited with a Bible and a nervous cough. The ceremony was quiet, no crowd, no grandeur. Just the two of them beneath a sky that had witnessed everything. Cole took her hands, rough palms against soft, and vowed not to possess but to protect. Tiva vowed not to heal him, but to walk beside him until the road itself gave way to sky. When they kissed, even the wind stilled to listen. That night, as they sat on the porch watching stars blink open, he whispered, "You sure you want this life? The hard one?" She looked at him, her smile small and infinite. "It was never the easy roads that called my name. But peace, in the West, was always a fragile thing." A week later, the rains came, a torrent that split the riverbanks and drowned the lower fields. Cole rode out to drive the cattle to higher ground, the storm clawing at him with blind fury. The water rose fast, swallowing fences, dragging trees into its mouth. When the horse stumbled and threw him, the current seized him like a living hand. He thought of Tiva's face, of her laughter against firelight, and let go. He woke to the smell of smoke and sage. Tiva knelt beside him, soaked and trembling, her hands pressing against his chest until she felt his heart beat back. She'd gone into the flood after him, rope tied to the porch rail, will stronger than death itself. All night she stayed at his side, whispering prayers in Apache that sounded half like grief, half like defiance. When dawn finally broke, she smiled through her tears, and the light in her eyes made the world new again. After that, the town began to change. Folks who had once turned away came bearing bread, tools, help. Children ran up to Tiva with drawings and questions. She answered each one as if she'd been waiting for them all along. Cole saw what she'd done, not through defiance or fury, but through steadfast grace, and his chest filled with something close to pride. Years passed like pages turning in a worn journal. The cabin grew full. The laughter of two children, the scent of bread, the soft hum of evening prayers. Cole's hair silvered. Tiva's songs never aged. Each day, he learned again how to stay, how to listen, how to love without fear of losing. The world, once sharp, grew tender around the edges. On their 10th anniversary, they returned to the station where it had all begun. The lamp still hung there, rusted but glowing faintly, a stubborn ember against the wind. The tracks gleamed under the moonlight, endless and empty. They stood side by side, older now, carved by both pain and peace. "You didn't leave me alone," she said, voice trembling with the echo of that first night. He looked at her, eyes soft as dusk. And you gave me the love I never expected. They stood there until the train came roaring past, dust swirling, coats billowing, the noise fierce and alive. When it faded, silence returned like a blessing. Tiva leaned her head on his shoulder, and the world felt complete in its stillness. Sometimes, when travelers passed through and asked about the strange couple by the ridge, a giant cowboy and an Apache woman with a song in her throat, they'd hear stories of a love that outlasted storms and shame. Some said the two were spirits now, still walking the rails under moonlight, hand in hand. But those who listened closer knew better. Love like that never leaves, it just changes its shape. And if you find yourself standing at a lonely station someday, with only wind for company and your heart too tired to hope, remember them. Remember that even the roughest hands can hold gentleness, and even the most broken soul can begin again. The world doesn't owe us love. It only offers the chance to stay long enough to find it. If you listen closely, you might still hear her whisper through the desert, dark, soft, certain, eternal, "Don't leave me alone."